Volume 3, Chapter 23 of Gwen Wynn. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Lars, Rolander. Gwen Wynn, A Romance of the Wye by Mayne REID. Volume 3, Chapter 23. A Justifiable Abduction. It is a moonless November night, and a fog drifting down from the Pas de Calais envelopes Boulogne in its damp, clammy embrace. The great cathedral clock is tolling 12 midnight, and the streets are deserted, the last wooden-heeled souliers having ceased clattering over their cobblestone pavements. If a foot passenger be abroad, he is some belated individual groping his way home from the Café de Billards he frequents, or the circle to which he belongs. Even the sergeants de ville are scarcer than usual, those seen being huddled up under the shelter of friendly porches, while the invisible ones are making themselves yet more snug inside cabarets, whose openness beyond licensed hours they wink at in return for the accommodation afforded. It is in truth a most disagreeable night, cold as dark, for the fog has frost in it. For all there are 3 men in the streets of Boulogne who regard neither its chillness nor obscurity. Instead, this last is just what they desire, and for days past have been waiting for. They who thus delight in darkness are Major Mahon, Captain Ryecroft, and the waterman Wingate. Not because they have thoughts of doing evil, for their purpose is of the very opposite character, to release a captive from captivity. The night has arrived when, in accordance with the promise made on that sheet of paper so dexterously pitched into her cloister, the Soeur Marie is to see friends in front of her window. They are the friends about to attempt taking her out of it. They are not going blindly about the thing, unlikely old campaigners as Mahon and Ryecroft would. During the interval since that warning summons was sent in, they have made thorough reconnaissance of the ground, taken stock of the convent's precincts and surroundings; in short, considered every circumstance of difficulty and danger. They are therefore prepared with all the means and appliances for effecting their design. Just as the last stroke of the clock ceases its booming reverberation, they issue forth from Mahon's house, and turning up the Rue Tintelleries, strike along a narrower street which leads on toward the ancient cité. The 2 officers walk arm in arm, Ryecroft, stranger to the place, needing guidance, while the boatman goes behind, with that carried aslant his shoulder, which, were it of the banks of the Wye, might be taken for a pair of oars. It is nevertheless a thing altogether different, a light ladder, though were it hundreds weight he would neither stagger nor groan under it. The errand he is upon knits his sinews, giving him the strength of a giant. They proceed with extreme caution, all 3 silent as spectres. When any sound comes to their ears, as the shutting to of a door, or distant footfall upon the ill-paved trottoirs, they make instant stop, and stand listening, speech passing among themselves only in whispers. But as these interruptions are few, they make fair progress, and in less than 20 minutes after leaving the Major's house, they have reached the spot where the real action is to commence. This is in the narrow lane which runs along the enceinte of the convent at back; a thoroughfare little used even in daytime, but after night solitary as a desert, and on this especial night dark as dungeon itself. They know the allée well, have traversed it scores of times within the last few days as nights, and could go through it blindfold. And they also know the enclosure wall, with its exact height, just that of the cloister window beyond, and a little less than their ladder, which has been selected with an eye to dimensions. While its bearer is easing it off his shoulder, and planting it firmly in place, a short whispered dialogue occurs between the other two, the Major saying, "We won't all three be needed for the work inside. One of us may remain here nay, must. Those sergeants de ville might be prowling about, or some of the convent people themselves, in which case we'll need warning before we dare venture back over the wall. If caught on the top of it, the petticoats obstructing, aye, or without them, 'twould go ill with us." "Quite true," assents the Captain. "Which of us do you propose staying here? Jack?" "Yes, certainly; and for more reasons than one. Excited as he is now, once getting his old flame into his arms, he'd be all on fire, perhaps with noise enough to wake the whole sleeping sisterhood, and bring them clamouring around us, like crows about an owl that had intruded into the rookery. Besides, there's a staff of male servants, for they have such, half a score of stout fellows, who'd show fight. A big bell, too, by ringing which they can rouse the town. Therefore, Master Jack must remain here. You tell him he must." Jack is told, with reasons given, though not exactly the real ones. Endorsing them, the Major says, "Don't be so impatient, my good fellow. It will make but a few seconds' difference, and then you'll have your girl by your side sure. Whereas, acting inconsiderately, you may never set eyes on her. The fight in the front will be easy. Our greatest danger's from behind; and you can do better in every way as for yourself, by keeping the rear guard." He thus counselled is convinced, and though much disliking it, yields prompt obedience. How could he otherwise? He is in the hands of men his superiors in rank and experience; and is it not for him they are there, risking liberty, it may be life? Having promised to keep his impulsiveness in check, he is instructed what to do. Simply to lie concealed under the shadow of the wall; and should any one be outside when he hears a low whistle, he is not to reply to it. The signal so arranged, Mahon and Ryecroft mount over the wall, taking the ladder along with them, and leaving the waterman to reflect, in nervous anxiety, how nearer his Mary is, and yet how far off she still may be. Once inside the garden, the other two strike off along a walk leading in the direction of the spot, which is their objective point. They go as if every grain of sand pressed by their feet had a friend's life in it. The very cats of the convent could not traverse its grounds more silently. Their caution is rewarded, for they arrive at the cloister sought, without interruption, to see its casement open, with a pale face in it, a picture of Madonna on a background of black, through the white film looking as if it were veiled. But though dense the fog, it does not hinder them from perceiving that the expression of that face is one of expectancy, nor her from recognising them as the friends who were to be under the window. With that voice from the Wyeside still echoing in her ears, she sees her deliverers at hand. They have indeed come! A woman of weak nerves would under the circumstances be excited, possibly cry out. But Soeur Marie is not such; and without uttering a word, even the slightest ejaculation, she stands still and patiently waits while a wrench is applied to the rotten bar of iron, soon snapping it from its support, as though it were but a stick of macaroni. It is Ryecroft who performs this burglarious feat, and into his arms she delivers herself, to be conducted down the ladder, which is done without as yet a word having been exchanged between them. Only after reaching the ground, and there is some feeling of safety, he whispers to her: "Keep up your courage, Mary. Your Jack is waiting for you outside the wall. Here, take my hand." Mary, my Jack, and you. Her voice becomes inaudible, and she totters back against the wall. "She's swooning has fainted," mutters the Major, which Ryecroft already knows, having stretched out his arms and caught her as she is sinking to the earth. "It is the sudden change into the open air," he says. "We must carry her, Major. You go ahead with the ladder. I can manage the girl myself." While speaking he lifts the unconscious form, and bears it away. No light weight either, but to strength as his, only a feather. The Major, going in advance with the ladder, guides him through the mist, and in a few seconds they reach the outer wall, Mahon giving a low whistle as he approaches. It is almost instantly answered by another from the outside, telling them the coast is clear. And in 3 minutes after they are also on the outside, the girl still resting in Ryecroft's arms. The waterman wishes to relieve him, agonised by the thought that his sweetheart, who has passed unscathed, as it were, through the very gates of death, may after all be dead. He urges it; but Mahon, knowing the danger of delay, forbids any sentimental interference, commanding Jack to re-shoulder the ladder, and follow as before. Then striking off in Indian file, the Major first, the Captain with his burden in the centre, the boatman bringing up behind, they retrace their steps towards the Rue Tintelleries. If Ryecroft but knew who he is carrying, he would bear her, if not more tenderly, with far different emotions and keener solicitude about her recovery from that swoon. It is only after she is out of his arms, and lying upon a couch in Major Mahon's house, the hood drawn back, and the light shining on her face, that he experiences a thrill, strange and wild as ever felt by a mortal man. No wonder, seeing it is Gwendoline Wynn. "Gwen!" he exclaims in a very ecstasy of joy, as her pulsing breast and opened eyes tell of returned consciousness. "Vivian!" is the murmured rejoinder, their lips meeting in delirious contact. Poor Jack Wingate! End of chapter 23. Read by Lars, Rolander. Volume 3, Chapter 24 of Gwen Wynn. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Lars, Rolander. Gwen Wynn, A Romance of the Wye, by Mayne REID. Volume 3, Chapter 24. Starting on a Continental Tour. Levin Murdock is dead and buried, has been for days. Not in the family vault of the Wynns, though he had the right of having his body there laid. But his widow, who had control of the interment, willed it otherwise. She has repugnance to opening that receptacle of the dead, holding a secret she may well dread disclosure of. There was no very searching inquiry into the cause of the man's death, none such seeming needed. A coroner's inquest, true, but of the most perfunctory kind. Several habitués of the Welsh Harp, with its staff of waiters, testified to having seen him at that hostelry till a late hour of the night on which he was drowned, and far gone in drink. The landlord advanced the narrative a stage by telling how he conveyed him to the boat, and delivered him to his boatman, Richard Dempsey. All true enough, while Coracle capped the story by a statement of circumstances, in part facts, but the major part fictitious, how the inebriate gentleman, after lying a while quiet at the bottom of the skiff, suddenly sprung upon his feet, and staggering excitedly about, capsized the craft, spilling both into the water. Some corroboration of this, in the boat having been found floating keel upwards, and the boatman arriving home at Llangorren soaking wet. To his having been in this condition, several of the court domestics, at the time called out of their beds with purpose prépense, were able to bear witness. But Dempsey's testimony is further strengthened, even to confirmation, by himself having since taken to bed, where he now lies dangerously ill of a fever, the result of a cold caught from that chilling douche. In this latest inquest the finding of the jury is set forth in two simple words: drowned accidentally. No suspicion attaches to any one, and his widow, now wearing the weeds of sombre hue, sorrows profoundly. But her grief is great only in the eyes of the outside world, and the presence of the Llangorren domestics. Alone within her chamber, she shows little signs of sorrow, and if possible less when Gregoire Rogier is her companion, which he almost constantly is. If more than half his time at the court while Lewin Murdock was alive, he is now there nearly the whole of it, no longer as a guest, but as much its master as she is its mistress. For that matter indeed more, if inference may be drawn from a dialogue occurring between them some time after her husband's death. They are in the library, where there is a strong chest, devoted to the safe keeping of legal documents, wills, leases, and the like, all the paraphernalia of papers relating to the administration of the estate. Rogier is at a table upon which many of these lie, with writing materials besides. A sheet of foolscap is before him, on which he has just scribbled the rough copy of an advertisement intended to be sent to several newspapers. "I think this will do," he says to the widow, who, in an easy chair drawn up in front of the fire, is sipping chartreuse and smoking paper cigarettes. "Shall I read it to you?" "No, I don't want to be bothered with the thing in detail. Enough if you let me hear its general purport." He gives her this in briefest epitome: "The Llangorren estates to be sold by public auction, with all the appurtenances, mansion, park, ornamental grounds, home and out farms, manorial rights, presentation to church living, etc., etc." "Très bien! Have you put down the date? It should be soon." "You're right, cherie. Should and must be. So soon I fear we won't realise 3/4 of the value. But there's no help for it, with the ugly thing threatening, hanging over our necks like a very sword of Damocles." "You mean the tongue of le braconnier?" She has reason to dread it. "No, I don't. Not in the slightest. There is a sickle too near his own, in the hands of the reaper, Death." "He's dying, then?" She speaks with an earnestness in which there is no feeling of compassion, but the very reverse. "He is," the other answers in like unpitying tone. "I've just come from his bedside." "From the cold he caught that night, I suppose?" "Yes, that's partly the cause. But," he adds with a diabolical grin, "more the medicine he has taken for it." "What mean you, Gregoire?" "Only that Monsieur Dick has been delirious, and I saw danger in it. He was talking too wildly." "You've done something to keep him quiet?" "I have." "What?" "Given him a sleeping draught." "But he'll wake up again, and then?" "Then I'll administer another dose of the anodyne." "What sort of anodyne?" "A hypodermic." "Hypodermic? I've never heard of the thing, not even the name." "A wonderful cure it is, for noisy tongues." "You excite one's curiosity. Tell me something of its nature." "Oh, it's very simple, exceedingly so. Only a drop of liquid introduced into the blood, not in the common roundabout way, by pouring down the throat, but direct injection into the veins. The process in itself is easy enough, as every medical practitioner knows. The skill consists in the kind of liquid to be injected.
That's one of the occult sciences I learnt in Italy, land of Lucrezia and Tofana, where such branches of knowledge still flourish. Elsewhere it's not much known, and perhaps it's well it isn't, or there might be more widowers, with a still larger proportion of widows." "Poison!" she exclaims involuntarily, adding in a timid whisper, "Was it Gregoire?" "Poison!" he echoes protestingly. "That's too plain a word, and the idea it conveys too vulgar, for such a delicate scientific operation as that I've performed. Possibly in Monsieur Coracle's case the effect will be somewhat similar, but not the after symptoms. If I haven't made miscalculation as to quantity, ere 3 days are over it will send him to his eternal sleep, and I'll defy all the medical experts in England to detect traces of poison in him. So don't inquire further, cherie. Be satisfied to know the hypodermic will do you a service, and," he adds with sardonic smile, "grateful if it be never given to yourself." She starts, recoiling in horror, not at the repulsive confessions she has listened to, but more through personal fear. Though herself steeped in crime, he beside her seems its very incarnation. She has long known him morally capable of anything, and now fancies he may have the power of the famed basilisk to strike her dead with a glance of his eyes. "Bah!" he exclaims, observing her trepidation, but pretending to construe it otherwise. "Why all this emotion about such miserable? He'll have no widow to lament him, inconsolable like yourself. Ha, ha! Besides, for our safety, both of us, his death is as much needed as was the other. After killing the bird that threatened to devour our crops, it would be blind buffoonery to keep the scarecrow standing. I only wish there were nothing but he between us, and complete security." "But is there still?" she asks, her alarm taking a new turn, as she observes a slight shade of apprehension pass over his face. "Certainly there is." "What?" "The little convent matter." "Mon Dieu! I supposed it arranged beyond the possibility of danger?" "Probability is the word you mean. In this sweet world there's nothing sure except money; that too, in hard cash coin. Even at the best we'll have to sacrifice a large slice of the estate to satisfy the greed of those who have assisted us, Messieurs les Jesuites. If I could only, as by some magician's wand, convert these clods of Herefordshire into a portable shape, I'd cheat them yet, as I've done already, in making them believe me one of their most ardent doctrinaires. Then, cher ami, we could at once move from Llangorren Court to a palace by some lake of Como, glassing softest skies, with whispering myrtles, and all the other fal-lals by which Monsieur Bulwer's sham prince humbugged the Lyonese shopkeeper's daughter. Ha, ha, ha!"
"But why can't it be done?"
"Ah, there the word impossible, if you like. What, convert a landed estate of several thousand acres into cash, presto instanter, as though one were but selling a flock of sheep? The thing can't be accomplished anywhere, least of all in this slow moving Angleterre, where men look at their money twice, 20 times, before parting with it. Even a mortgage couldn't be managed for weeks, maybe months, without losing quite the moiety of value. But a bona fide sale for which we must wait, and with that cloud hanging over us. Oh, it's damnable! The thing's been a blunder from beginning to end, all through the squeamishness of Monsieur votre mari. Had he agreed to what I first proposed, and done with Mademoiselle what should have been done, he might himself still, the simpleton, soft heart and softer head. Well, it's of no use revealing him now. He paid the forfeit for being a fool. And 'twill do no good our giving way to apprehensions, that after all may turn out shadows, however dark. In the end everything may go right, and we can make our midnight flitting in a quiet, comfortable way. But what a flutter there will be among my flock at the Rugg's Ferry chapel, when they wake up some fine morning, and rub their eyes, only to see that their good shepherd has forsaken them! A comical scene of which I'd like being a spectator. Ha ha ha!" She joins him in the laugh, for the sally is irresistible. And while they are still ha-haing, a touch at the door tells of a servant seeking admittance. It is the butler who presents himself, salver in hand, on which rests a chrome-coloured envelope, at a glance seen to be a telegraphic dispatch. It bears the address Reverend Gregoire Rogier, Rugg's Ferry, Herefordshire; and when opened the telegram is seen to have been sent from Folkestone. Its wording is: "The bird has escaped from its cage. Prenez garde." Well for the pseudo priest and his cher ami, that before they read it the butler had left the room; for though figurative the form of expression, and cabalistic the words, both man and woman seem instantly to comprehend them, and with such comprehension as almost to drive them distracted. He is silent, as if struck dumb, his face showing blanched and bloodless, while she utters a shriek, half terrified, half in frenzied anger. It is the last loud cry or word to which she gives utterance at Llangorren; and no longer there speaks the priest loudly or authoritatively. The after hours of that night are spent by both of them, not as the owners of the house, but burglars in the act of breaking it. Up till the hour of dawn the two might be seen silently flitting from room to room, attended only by Clarisse, who carries the candle, ransacking drawers and secretaires, selecting articles of bijouterie and vertu, of little weight but large value, and packing them in trunks and travelling bags; all of which, under the grey light of morning, are taken to the nearest railway station in one of the court carriages, a large drag barouche, inside which ride Rogier and Madame Murdock, veuve, her femme de chambre having a seat beside the coachman, who has been told they are starting on a Continental tour. And so were they; but it was a tour from which they never returned. Instead, it was extended to a greater distance than they themselves designed, and in a direction neither dreamt of; since their career, after a year's interval, ended in deportation to Cayenne, for some crime committed by them in the south of France. So said the semaphore of Marseilles. End of chapter 24. Read by Lars, Rolander. Volume 3, Chapter 25 of Gwen Wynn. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Lars, Rolander. Gwen Wynn, A Romance of the Wye, by Mayne REID. Volume 3, Chapter 25. Coracle Dick on his deathbed. As next morning's sun rises over Llangorren Court, it shows a mansion without either master or mistress. Not long to remain so, if the old servants of the establishment had short notice of dismissal. Still more brief is that given to its latest retinue. About meridian of that day, after the departure of their mistress, while yet in wonder where she has gone, they receive another shock of surprise, and a more unpleasant one, at seeing a hackney carriage drive up to the hall door, out of which step two men, evidently no friends to her from whom they have their wages. For one of them is Captain Ryecroft, the other a police superintendent, who, after the shortest possible parley
directs the butler to parade the complete staff of his fellow domestics, male and female. This with an air, and in a tone of authority, which precludes supposition that the thing is a jest. Summoned from all quarters, cellar to garret, and outdoors as well, their names with other particulars are taken down, and they are told that their services will be no longer required at Llangorren. In short, they are one and all dismissed, without a word about their month's wages or warning. If they get either, 'twill be only as a grace. Then they receive orders to pack up and be off, while Joseph Preece, ex-Charon, who has crossed the river in his boat, with appointment to meet the hackney there, is authorised to take temporary charge of the place, Jack Wingate, similarly bespoke, having come down in his skiff to stand by him in case of any opposition. None arises. However chagrined by their hasty sans façon discharge, the outgoing domestics seem not so greatly surprised at it, from what they have observed for some time going on, as also something whispered about. They had no great reliance on their places being permanent. So in silence all submit, though somewhat sulkily, and prepare to vacate quarters they had found fairly snug. There is one, however, who cannot be thus conveniently or unceremoniously dismissed, the head gamekeeper, Richard Dempsey. For while the others are getting their mandamus to move, the report is brought in that he is lying on his deathbed. So the parish doctor has prognosticated. Also that he is just then delirious, and saying queer things, some of which, repeated to the police super, tell him his proper place at that precise moment is by the bedside of the sick man. Without a second's delay he starts off towards the lodge in which Coracle has been of late domiciled, under the guidance of its former occupant, Joseph Preece, accompanied by Captain Ryecroft and Jack Wingate. The house being but a few hundred yards distant from the court, they are soon inside it, and standing over the bed on which lies the fevered patient, not at rest but tossing to and fro, at intervals in such violent manner as to need restraint. The superintendent at once sees it would be idle putting questions to him. If asked his own name, he could not declare it, for he knows not himself, far less those who are around. His face is something horrible to behold. It would but harrow sensitive feelings to give a portraiture of it. Enough to say, it is more like that of a demon than man. And his speech, poured as in a torrent from his lips, is alike horrifying. Admission of many and varied crimes, in the same breath denying them and accusing others; his contradictory ravings garnished with the blasphemous ejaculations. A specimen will suffice, omitting the blasphemy. "It's a lie!" he cries out, just as they are entering the room. "A lie, every word o't! I didn't murder Mary Morgan. Served her right, if I had, the jade! She jilted me, and for that wasp Wingate, dog cur! I didn't kill her. No, only fixed the plank. If she were fool enough to step on't, that warn't my fault. She did! Ah!" For a while he keeps up the horrid cachinnation, has the glee of Satan, exulting over some feat of foul diablerie. Then, his thoughts changing to another crime, he goes on: "The grand gal, the lady, she aren't drowned, nor dead either. The priest carried her off in that French schooner. I had nothing to do with it. 'Twere the priest and Mr Murdock. Ah, Murdock! I did drown him. No, I didn't. That's another lie. 'Twas himself upset the boat. Let me see, was it? No, he couldn't. He was too drunk. I stood up on the skiff's rail. Slap over it went. What a ducking I had for it! And a devil o' a swim too.
But I did the trick neatly, didn't I, your reverence? Now for the £100, and you promised to double it, you did. Keep to your bargain, or I'll peach upon you, on all the lot of you. The woman, too, the French woman. She kept that fine shawl, Indian they said it were. She's got it now. She wanted the diamonds too, but daren't keep them. The shroud, the shroud, that's all they left me. I ought to ha' burnt it, but then the devil would have been after and burned me. How fine Mary looked in that grand dress, wi' all them gewgaws, rings, chains, and bracelets, all pure gold. But I drowned her as she deserved it. Drowned her twice. Ha ha ha!
Again he breaks off with a peal of demoniac laughter, long continued. More than an hour they remain listening to his delirious ramblings, and with interest intense. For, despite its incoherence, the disconnected threads joined together make up a tale they can understand, though so strange, so brimful of atrocities, as to seem incredible. All the while he is writhing about on the bed, till at length, exhausted, his head droops over upon the pillow, and he lies for a while quiet, to all appearance dead. But no, there is another throe yet, one horrible as any that has preceded. Looking up, he sees the superintendent's uniform and silver buttons, a sight which produces a change in the expression of his features, as though it had recalled him to his senses. With arms flung out as in defence, he shrieks, "Keep back, you policeman! Hands off, or I'll brain you! You've got the rope round my neck! Curse the thing! It's choking me! And with his fingers clutching at his throat, as if to undo a noose, he gasps out in husky voice, "Gone, by God!" At this he drops over dead, his last word an oath, his last thought a fancy that there is a rope around his neck. What he has said in his unconscious confessions lays open many seeming mysteries of this romance, hitherto unrevealed. How the pseudo priest, Father Rogier, observing a likeness between Miss Wynn and Mary Morgan, causing him that start as he stood over the coffin, noticed by Jack Wingate, had exhumed the dead body of the latter, the poacher and Murdock assisting him. Then how they had taken it down in the boat to Dempsey's house, soon after going over to Llangorren, and seizing the young lady as she stood in the summer house, having stifled her cries by chloroform. Then how they carried her across to Dempsey's, and substituted the corpse for the living body, the grave clothes changed for the silken dress with all its adornments, this the part assigned to Mrs Murdock, who had met them at Coracle's cottage. Then Dick himself hiding away the shroud, hindered by superstitious fear from committing it to the flames. In fine, how Gwendoline Wynn, drugged and still kept in a state of coma, was taken down in a boat to Chepstow, and there put aboard the French schooner La Chouette, carried across to Boulogne, to be shut up in a convent for life. All these delicate matters managed by Father Rogier, backed by Monsieur le Jésuite, who had furnished him with the means. One after another the astounding facts come forth, as the raving man continues his involuntary admissions, supplemented by others, already known to Ryecroft and the rest. With the deductions drawn, they complete the unities of a drama, iniquitous as ever enacted. Its motives declare themselves, all wicked save one. This a spark of humanity that had still lingered in the breast of Levin Murdock, but for which Gwendoline Wynn would never have seen the inside of a nunnery. Instead, while under the influence of the narcotic, her body would have been dropped into the Wye, just as was that wearing her ball dress. and that same body is now wearing another dress, supposed to have been prepared for her, another shroud, reposing in the tomb where all believed Gwen Wynn to have been laid. This last fact is brought to light on the following day, when the family vault of the Wynns is reopened, and Mrs Morgan, by marks known only to herself, identifies the remains found there as those of her own daughter. End of chapter 25. Read by Lars, Rolander. Volume 3, Chapter 26 of Gwen Wynn. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Lars, Rolander. Gwen Wynn, A Romance of the Wye, by Mayne REID. Volume 3, Chapter 26. The Calm After the Storm. 12 months after the events recorded in this Romance of the Wye, a boat tourist descending the picturesque river, and inquiring about a pagoda-like structure he will see on its western side, would be told it is a summer house standing in the ornamental grounds of a gentleman's residence. If he asks who the gentleman is, the answer would be Captain Vivian Ryecroft, for the ex-officer of Hussars is now the master of Llangorren, and, what he himself values higher, the husband of Gwendoline Wynn, once more its mistress. Were the tourist an acquaintance of either, and on his way to make call at the court, bringing in by the little dock, he would there see a rowboat, on its sternboard, in gold lettering, the Gwendoline. For the pretty pleasure craft has been restored to its ancient moorings, still, however, remaining the property of Joseph Preece, who no longer lives in the cast-off cottage of Coracle Dick, but, like the boat itself, is again back and in service at Llangorren. If the day be fine, this venerable and versatile individual will be loitering beside it, or seated on one of its thwarts, pipe in mouth, indulging in the dolce far niente. And little besides has he to do, since his pursuits are no longer varied, but now exclusively confined to the calling of waterman to the court. He and his craft are under charter for the remainder of his life, should he wish it so, as he surely will. The friendly visitor, keeping on up to the house, if at the hour of luncheon, will in all likelihood there meet a party of old acquaintances, ours if not his. Besides the beautiful hostess at the table's head, he will see a lady of the antique brocaded type, who herself once presided there, by name Miss Dorothea Linton, another known as Miss Eleanor Lees, and a fourth, youngest of the quartet, yclept Kate Mahon, for the schoolgirl of the Boulogne convent has escaped from its austere studies, and is now most part of her time resident with a friend she helped to escape from its cloisters. Men there will also be at the Llangorren luncheon table, likely 3 of them, in addition to the host himself. One will be Major Mahon, a second the Reverend William Musgrave, and the third Mr. George Shenstone. Yes, George Shenstone, under the roof and seated at the table of Gwendoline Wynn, now the wife of Vivian Ryecroft. To explain a circumstance seemingly so singular, it is necessary to call in the aid of a saying, culled from that language richest of all others in moral and metaphysical imagery, the Spanish. It has a proverb, un claco saca otro claco, one nail drives out the other. And watching the countenance of the baronet's son, so long sad and clouded, seeing how, at intervals, it brightens up, these intervals when his eyes meet those of Kate Mahon. It were easy predicting that in his case the adage will ere long have additional verification. Were the same tourist to descend the Wye at a date posterior, and again make a call at Llangorren, he would find that some changes had taken place in the interval of his absence. At the boat dock old Joe would likely be, but not as before in sole charge of the pleasure craft, only pottering about as a pensioner retired on full pay. The acting and active officer being a younger man, by name Wingate, who is now waterman to the court. Between these two, however, there is no spite about the displacement, no bickerings nor heartburnings. How could there, since the younger addresses the older as uncle, himself in return being styled Nevy? No need to say that this relationship has been brought about by the bright eyes of Amy Preece, nor is it so new. In the lodge where Jack and Joe lived together is a brace of chubby chicks, one of them a boy, the possible embryo of a Wye waterman, who, dandled upon old Joe's knees, takes delight in weeding his frosted whiskers, while calling him "good granddaddy." As Jack's mother, who is also a member of this happy family, forewarned him, the wildest grief must in time give way, and nature's laws assert their supremacy. So has he found it; and though still holding Mary Morgan in sacred honest remembrance, he, as many a true man before, and others as true to come, has yielded to the inevitable. Proceeding on to the court, the friendly visitor will at certain times there meet the same people he met before, but the majority of them having new names or titles. An added number in two interesting olive branches there also, with complexions struggling between blonde and brunette, who call Captain and Mrs. Ryecroft their papa and mamma, while the lady who was once Eleanor Lees, the companion, is now Mrs. Musgrave, life companion, not to the curate of Llangorren Church, but its rector, the living having become vacant, and in bestowal of Llangorren's heiress has been worthily bestowed on the Reverend William. Two other old faces, with all young ones, the returned tourist will see at Llangorren, their owners on visit as himself. He might not know either of them by the names they now bear, Sir George and Lady Shenstone; for when he last saw them, the gentleman was simply Mr Shenstone, and the lady Miss Mahon. The old baronet is dead, and the young one, succeeding to the title, has also taken upon himself another title, that of husband, proving the Spanish apothegm true, both in the spirit and to the letter. If there be any nail capable of driving out another, it is that sent home by the glance of an Irish girl's eye; at least so thinks Sir George Shenstone, with good reason for thinking it. There are two other individuals who come and go at the court, the only ones holding out, and likely to hold, against change of any kind; for Major Mahon is still Major Mahon, rolling on in his rich Irish brogue as ever abhorrent of matrimony; no danger of his becoming a Benedict, and as little of Miss Linton being transformed into a sage woman. It would be strange if she should, with the love novels she continues to devour, and the court intelligence she gulps down, keeping alive the hallucination that she is still a belle at Bath and Cheltenham. So ends our Romance of the Wye, a drama of happy denouement to most of the actors in it, and, as hoped, satisfactory to all who have been spectators. The End. End of chapter 26, read by Lars, Rolander. And thereby also end of the book Gwen Wynn, A Romance of the Wye, by Mayne REID. Thank you so much for listening.